The physician's hands trembled slightly. I observed her fixate on my file, rather than the ultrasound screen displaying my baby. The heartbeat flickered in shades of black and white. No, she was fixated on the paperwork, on my husband's name elegantly inscribed in tidy letters at the top of the page. Then she simply switched off the monitor. It felt as if someone had yanked the plug on my whole existence, right in the midst of the exam. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, her voice barely a whisper, softly spoken. "I must speak with you in private at this moment." She guided me to her office, shut the door, and secured it with a lock. I had a feeling that something was amiss with the baby. My heart raced fiercely, its rhythm echoing in my ears. I was unable to exhale. My mind was blank. Then she uttered words that shattered my entire existence. 1. You must part ways with your husband today before returning home. First, secure a divorce attorney. I chuckled. I genuinely burst into laughter. What is happening? What is the reason behind this? We are expecting a little one together. We are filled with joy. I find myself perplexed. That is precisely the issue at hand. Her face resembled a blank sheet of paper. What I am about to reveal to you, this will transform your entire perspective on your marriage. Allow me to begin at the outset for you. I find myself reflecting on how I ended up in that office, 4 months pregnant. My entire life has been constructed on falsehoods conveyed by the man who shares my nights in slumber. Daphne Wilson is my name. I am 32 years old, ancient. I serve as the marketing director at a boutique agency located in Connecticut, and I hail from what some might graciously refer to as antiquity currency. 5 years have passed since my grandmother Eleanor departed this world, leaving me her estate, approximately $2.3 million held in a trust, along with the historic Wilson family residence, where 5 countless women have experienced life, love, and the joys of motherhood through the ages. I never showcased it. I dedicated myself to my own efforts profession. I navigated the streets in my decade-old Subaru, stopping by the same cozy cafe for my morning coffee ritual. The legacy was a safeguard, not identity. However, it positioned me as a target. I simply hadn't realized it at that moment. I encountered Grant Mercer 4 years back at my family's yearly fundraising event. For decades, the Wilsons had been the ones to host it. During that year, I found myself positioned at the bar. I sought refuge from a conversation with a man who had inquired about my financial situation within mere moments. Minutes of the meeting with me. Nuanced, wouldn't you say? Then Gran made her entrance. He stood tall, with dark hair framing his face, and an easy smile that could light up the room. He inquired about my identity. Imbibing. Cracked a joke about the awful jazz band. There was no mention of finances at all. He asserted that he was merely a financial advisor who had received a last-minute invitation from a coworker. He claimed he was completely unaware of who the Wilson family was. Reflecting on the past, that ought to have been my initial warning sign. A financial advisor who neglects to investigate the background of a prominent charity's host family occurrence? That's akin to a chef arriving at a cooking competition and casually stating, "Oh, we're preparing food today." What a surprise. However, I grew weary of blatant gold diggers. And here was this delightful individual inquiring about my favorite books, rather than my finances. Profile. Our relationship lasted for a year. Grant was observant, considerate, and recalled the minute particulars. He was adamant about covering the cost of dinners, despite the fact that I could have easily purchased the restaurant myself. He appeared so authentic. My mother, Vivian, perceived his true nature right away. Following their initial encounter, she took me aside. "The smile fails to illuminate his eyes." She remarked, "There's something off about him, Daphne. I can sense it," I remarked, suggesting that she was merely being paranoid, overly protective, perhaps even a bit jealous. We argued about Grant incessantly. In the end, we simply ceased all communication. 2 years of almost complete silence between myself and the woman who nurtured me, birthday messages, and nothing else. Everything stems from my decision to, I trust my husband more than my own mother. Heads up, Mom had the right idea all along. And she is I've been waiting patiently to express, "I told you so." At this juncture, she has undeniably earned it. After a beautiful journey together, Grant and I tied the knot. 1 year of being in a relationship. A stunning ceremony unfolded at my grandmother's estate. He wept during his vows, with tears cascading down his cheeks, as he pledged to love and safeguard me, eternally. Reflecting on that moment, it seems those tears were perhaps the truest he ever cried. Not from happiness, but from a sense of release. The extended effort was finally yielding results. Following 2 years of attempting to conceive naturally, we consulted with a fertility specialist. The diagnosis struck with overwhelming force. Grant possessed significant male factor infertility. His sperm count was nearly negligible, and what little he possessed hardly shifted. Achieving natural conception was virtually unattainable. Grant appeared utterly crushed. He wept in the drive for 20 minutes. He offered his apologies repeatedly, as if it were a deep personal shortcoming. I reassured him, saying that we would let's solve this collaboratively. That is the essence of marriage. What I was unaware of was that Grant wasn't shedding tears of sorrow. He found himself in tears, overwhelmed by the newfound complexity of his plan. Every ounce of that emotion was him reevaluating, not grieving. We opted for IVF using a specialized technique known as ICSI, where doctors introduce a solitary sperm directly into an egg. This is our greatest opportunity. Grant took it upon himself to delve into the research of clinics. He discovered one that he claimed was ideal, managed all the documentation. In that moment, I believed he was showing his support because I felt utterly exhausted, as if every ounce of emotion had been siphoned away. The initial attempt was a failure, leaving a profound sense of loss. I was unable to rise from slumber for 3 consecutive days. Grant embraced me, softly murmuring words of support. We vowed to give it another shot. The second cycle, which took place 7 months ago, was successful. Optimistic test for pregnancy. 2 pink lines that transformed everything. Joyful tears streamed down my face. Grant embraced me tightly, already discussing nursery hues and baby names, and the future he had always envisioned. Subsequently, he casually brought up that I should update my will now that we're a family. It struck me as thoughtful and sensible, the sort of gesture a caring partner would consider. I was completely unaware that he had already been claiming my grandmother's wealth as if it were his own. All appeared to be flawless. The devoted partner, the little one on the horizon, the life I envisioned since childhood. While playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden, I was completely unaware that in merely 3 months, a stranger with quivering hands would present me with documents that would incinerate my flawless existence. Embers. Little did I know that the blaze had been ignited by the man resting beside me, each and every night. Before we proceed, if you're finding pleasure in this tale, kindly subscribe and share your thoughts with me in the share your location and the current time in your comments. I have gone through each and every comment, and it genuinely holds great significance to me. Universe to me. Let us return to the tale at hand. 4 months into my pregnancy, a change had occurred in my marriage. Little details initially the sorts of details you observe but rationalize, as the other possibility is excruciating to contemplate. Grant began placing his phone face down on every surface. I was unaware of the new password. He would go outside to take calls, return with a vague mention of work matters, and swiftly shift the conversation before I had a chance to inquire. Inquiries. He asserted that he was reorganizing client portfolios during those late-night conversations at 11 p.m. on It's a Saturday. While I may not be a financial guru, I believe the stock market enjoys a break on weekends. Except for Grant. He certainly did not have any secret clients in Tokyo. There was an underlying current at play. The long hours spent at the office during the night increased. 3 times a week, occasionally 4. He didn't return until the clock struck midnight. He works in finance. Consultant, not an emergency room surgeon. What could possibly necessitate such a demanding schedule? I discovered some receipts. An establishment for dining I had never visited downtown before. $280 for an evening meal for 2. A hotel located in the city, 40, just a few moments away from our home. What could possibly lead my husband to require a hotel room in such proximity to our home? When I inquired, Grant provided responses. For all things, answers flowed effortlessly, almost rehearsed, arriving with a speed that felt slightly off. Important client dinner. Connecting with others. The hotel served as the venue for a conference that extended into the late hours. Staying over simply felt like the more sensible choice rather than driving. Home, utterly drained. As I pressed further, as I probed with additional inquiries, his tone shifted. Daphne, you are acting anxious. It's all about the hormones. My mother cautioned me about this. Women may experience heightened emotions during pregnancy. Refrain from turning to become one of those wives. A wave of embarrassment washed over me for even bringing it up. He was exceptionally skilled at this. He compelled me to express my regret for interrogating him. The strain of financial burdens grew more acute during that period. Grant's inquiries regarding finances intensified, constant, increasingly pressing, increasingly imaginative. I believe it would be beneficial to include me in your circle of trust. What if an issue arises during the delivery process? It is essential to have access to funds for the baby. It's simply sensible. The concept of power of attorney is rooted in practicality. Each union a couple engages in the act. If you trust me, we both know your grandmother's house is far too large for us. It would be wise to put it on the market. Allocate the funds appropriately. I have a clear understanding of the funds that would optimize our returns. A man approached me with a proposal to sell my grandmother's home and allow him to invest the proceeds. This is the very same individual who insisted he required 3 distinct streaming services, as he struggled to recall which one featured his favorite shows. That is, Who I Am should have confidence with $2 million. Certainly not. When I declined, softly and with great caution, Grant's warmth dissipated. He turned frigid, remote. He commenced resting on the distant side of the bed, asserting that my movements had become excessive since the onset of my pregnancy. The discussions intensified often. He would mention the trust I had declined. He would ignore me completely for days on end. He is quiet. The treatments continued precisely until he felt the pangs of hunger. It's amusing how that turned out. It seems that his principles once had their moment. The boundary was defined, and that boundary was an unfilled belly. He hardly made contact with me anymore. Attribute it to the transformation of my body. He claimed he didn't. I feel a desire to cause harm to the baby. It appeared compassionate at first glance. The sensation of rejection coursed through me, deep and visceral. I attempted to engage him in conversation concerning it. He claimed I was overly dependent, emotional, and challenging. I began to question whether the issue lay within myself. On a particular night, I found myself awakening. Awake at 2 a.m., I found Grant absent from the bed. I discovered him in the kitchen, bent over his phone, whispering softly. I lingered in the corridor, attuned to the sounds around me. It is nearly upon us, he remarked. As spring approaches, all matters will be resolved. I simply had to wait until he noticed me, and then hung up right away. He referred to it as a work emergency. Proceed. Return to slumber, my dear. I didn't inquire about who experiences work emergencies at 2 a.m., concerning matters being resolved by spring. I found myself exhausted, heavily pregnant, and filled with a sense of desperation that made it hard to trust in the stability of my marriage. My closest companion, Tara, visited for lunch next week. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, observing as I crafted one excuse after another for Grant. The weight of his stress, the demands of his work, the transition into fatherhood. At last, she set her fork aside and gazed at me with those familiar eyes that had recognized me since our college days. Daph, take a moment to reflect on your words. When was the last occasion have you had a conversation with your mom? I chose not to respond. When was the last time Grant genuinely seemed pleased to see you, rather than just putting on a facade of happiness, not performing for an audience? Truly delighted to witness you enter the room. I was unable to provide a response to that. Neither. Have faith in your instincts, Tara advised. There seems to be an issue present. I informed her that I may have been a bit dramatic. Yet that night, sleep eluded me. I found myself pondering Grant's phone, perpetually resting face down, his long evenings, his unexpected fixation on gaining control over my finances. The way he gazed at me on occasion, as if he believed I felt overlooked, as if I were merely a math problem to be solved, rather than a person deserving of love. 4 months along, routine obstetrician visits scheduled for an ultrasound. My regular doctor was away on vacation, so I had an appointment with a colleague, Dr. Claire Brennan. I ventured forth by myself. Grant found himself facing a client meeting that he simply could not afford to skip. Routine appointment, nothing to report. Extraordinary. I reclined on the exam table, the chill of the gel spreading across my belly. Anticipation building as I awaited the results. The little one twirling on the screen as usual. Dr. Brennan exhibited a warm demeanor and a high level of professionalism. She engaged in light conversation while as the equipment was being set up. I was asked about my feelings and whether the baby was moving around a lot, along with all the usual inquiries. Subsequently, as she opened my file and glanced at the paperwork, her expression shifted dramatically. She glanced at my husband's name, then at me, and back again. Upon the mention, I observed her hands begin to shake. She placed the ultrasound wand aside, leaned over, and switched off the observe thoroughly. "Mrs. Mercer," she murmured, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "I would like to have a conversation with you. At this moment, in a private manner. I had a feeling that something was amiss with the baby. Every worst." A vivid scenario rushed into my thoughts in an instant. She guided me to her office, shut the door, and secured it with a lock. Behind us, she uttered words that shattered my entire reality. "I know what your husband did, and I have proof." She retrieved a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands remained motionless, trembling as she unsealed it. "My younger sister mentioned that she works at your fertility clinic. 3 weeks prior, she approached me, weeping. She revealed it all to me. Upon glancing at your file just now, your husband's name struck me as instantly familiar." Dr. Brennan inhaled deeply. "My sincerest apologies, Mrs. Mercer. However, it's essential for you to witness this prior to heading home, before he understands that, you see." She placed the folder open on her desk between us, and all my previous assumptions about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved crumbled to dust before my eyes. Gaze. Dr. Claire Brennan's younger sister, Molly, served as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the very clinic my husband had meticulously researched our IVF treatment, and he was convinced that the clinic he chose was ideal for us. At this moment, I comprehended the reasons behind his meticulous selection. Claire provided a thorough explanation of everything. Her voice remained steady, even though her hands were not. 3 weeks prior, Molly had arrived at Claire's apartment just before the clock struck midnight. She was weeping profoundly. She struggled to find her words. Sleep had eluded her. She had shed some pounds. The guilt gnawed at her insides relentlessly. After months of enduring it, she finally reached her breaking point. 7 months prior, Molly mentioned that a patient's husband had reached out to her, within the medical facility. He exuded charm, was impeccably dressed, appeared desperate yet maintained a sense of reason. He mentioned that he possessed something unique, an instance that called for careful judgment. He clarified that his wife was unaware, but he had been utilizing donor sperm for their IVF. Revolve, a family genetic concern he preferred not to impose on her. There's nothing malevolent here. He simply required assistance in maintaining it. Calm. He would compensate generously for the help. $30,000 for a nurse earning $52,000 annually. Overwhelmed by the weight of student loans and credit card debt, refusal was simply not an option. Molly assisted in changing the samples. Grants. The sperm, which was incapable of resulting in a pregnancy, was substituted with sperm from a compensated donor. The embryologist was involved as well. Grant had come to him privately with an additional payment. Amidst the switch remained unnoticed. Molly was reassured by the embryologist's words, urging her not to worry. The husband is fully aware of his actions. It's not our concern what agreements married couples establish. but it helps. Molly felt a surge of joy, particularly upon discovering in the clinic records that the pregnancy had been successful. Out in the vast expanse there existed a woman cradled a baby she was convinced was her husband's offspring. Yet it was not. The weight of guilt consumed her. She averted her gaze, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. She frequently reported being unwell. She began experiencing panic attacks while at work. 3 weeks prior, she ultimately shattered. She confided in Claire about everything. I found myself in that office, absorbing Dr. Brennan's explanation of how my husband invested $50,000 to set me up for infidelity. $50,000! That amount exceeds what he invested in our whole wedding, honeymoon included. It seems I have finally uncovered the true nature of his priorities all along. They certainly weren't the open bar, but there was something beyond that. Endless possibilities. Claire unveiled the entire plan, the strategy. For more than a year, Grant had been constructing meticulously, one piece at a time. The first phase has been successfully completed. Offer a financial incentive to the clinic personnel. Change the samples of sperm. Ensure that silence is maintained by all. The second phase has also been finalized. Anticipate a triumph, expecting a child. Embrace the role of a dedicated and enthusiastic soon-to-be father. Create the ideal representation.